Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
From the secret lair of the Talk of Santa Clarita Studios, Radio Free Santa Clarita presents The Talk of Santa Clarita, a podcast about issues involving Santa Clarita and the surrounding valley. Episode 150, a coronavirus special edition with Democratic candidate for the 25th Congressional District, California Assemblymember Christy Smith. And now, let's see what the Talk of Santa Clarita is.
And remember, this is for posterity, so be honest.
Christy, thanks for doing this today. I appreciate it. This is a really weird situation, but we're doing the whole social distancing kind of situation.
Absolutely. It's good to be here with you virtually and safely.
You are in the secret layer of the Talk of Santa Clarita Studios. So let's get things up front. Just address one issue that a lot of people, during the primary, a lot of people were asking me why I didn't get you on the show. So do you just want to talk about what was going on, why we couldn't get you on the show or anything like that? I mean, I know you were busy, but I mean, you want to...
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of folks in your listenership already realize I am their member of the California State Assembly. And so we were trying to be really balanced. I take it very seriously that I do my full-time day job that the people of these communities are expecting me to do. And so we balanced priorities accordingly, trying to be as available to the campaign and constituencies as possible, but at the same time, making sure that I got my day job done. So I appreciate your patience as we got through the primary and the special primary, and now we're on the other side of it. I'd love to say I have a little more time on my hands, but, given this crisis, the work of the full-time state legislative job continues. And so we're fitting everything in as best we can.
So let me translate that. The Governor Newsom is more important than me. So, so I mean, how have you been holding up? I mean, just the whole situation with the virus situation and stuff like that. I mean,
sure. Well, last week, the California legislature had a bipartisan unanimous vote to go into recess. And the interesting details about why is that according to the state's constitution, if we are in session, the building of the state capitol needs to remain open to the public. And given what public health guidelines were and the increasing numbers of COVID cases, particularly in Northern California and the counties surrounding the capitol, we felt it was important from a public health perspective, as well as protection of some of our members. There are a number of members in both houses who are in risk groups, either by age or by comorbidity of health conditions. And so we felt it was essential for us to be able to go on recess, one, for safety, and two, the most effective work a lot of us can be doing right now is in our own home districts. And so for me, that work has looked like checking in with our chambers of commerce, with our medical providers, whether clinics, our local hospitals, checking in with individuals and making ourselves available for casework and constituent support for all of the hours that we've been open for business. And most of these days lately, it's been longer than a 9-to-5 day, but we are happy to be here on the ground doing that work. And then also before the legislature left, we took a bipartisan unanimous vote to allocate $1 billion to the governor to use in these first few weeks of COVID emergency response. And so we continue to be in connection with Sacramento through our various committees, along with our leadership team in the governor's office, getting regular updates and continuing to do the work of government just in a completely new mode that we haven't done before.
Were you flying up and back and forth in the past week or so with meeting? I mean, obviously you must have been, but I mean.
Yeah, well, no, our last meeting was Monday of last week, and then we all came home. Mm-hmm. I came home the following day. I set up my Sacramento team to be able to do the work they needed to do remotely from the Capitol, which they are doing, and then came back here. We had several days in the state office, and now we have adjusted that schedule. I mean, obviously government is considered essential work, and so we have triaged it. So part of my team is there part-time. We're rotating days. everyone else is working remotely, but the office is always staffed here in the community from 9 to 5, or as I said, longer every day that we're open. What
are your thoughts about COVID-19 as far as, I mean, there are some that are trying to play it down. There are some that are, that are screaming from, about how dangerous the situation is. I mean,
sure.
It's almost, our media is so polarized now. It's almost like you don't know that there's only two extremes, you know what I mean?
Right.
So as somebody who's, in the assembly and dealing with this issue, I mean, what do we believe? What do we need to know?
Well, first and foremost, I would say it isn't so much a matter of what kind of media you believe in at this point. We really need to be taking our advice and information from trusted public health officials. And so there are multiple websites being published right now, from the CDC to the state's COVID-19 website to Los Angeles County and Ventura County websites where I serve, where you can go to get up-to-date information on treating the condition yourself if you are feeling unwell, if you have a family member who's unwell, to what the public health guidance is for the current stay-at-home orders, as well as economic information and help and support. And that's what we're going to see become the most critical over these next couple of days and weeks. We already know there's been significant job loss in the community, particularly in the retail and entertainment food sector. And so that's one of the things that my office has remained focused on, is getting people connected to the support and resources they need, whether that's the Federal Small Business Association emergency loans, to being connected with the EDD website to apply for unemployment. But, right now, I think what this points to is these are the reasons why we always need a government that functions well and serves the needs of the people. And so I'm really proud to be a part of the California government right now. I think we are handling this ambitiously and robustly given the circumstances. I am hopeful that the federal legislature passes this support package soon, and that it gets signed by the president, because those resources are absolutely essential to the work that we're continuing to do on the ground here. Yeah,
I want to ask you about that package in a little bit here. What else is there to do right now these days except read Facebook? But there was one person that posted recently, one of your critics, about the California's preparedness, and that you're on the Emergency Management Committee. The criticism was that the committee hadn't met since February 21st, and all it really addressed was fires. Is that the case, or what? I mean, what was going on?
Yeah, I mean, look, here's the reality. That committee exists as an oversight committee between the two houses of the legislature in order for us to both anticipate, but typically do cleanup on issues that have occurred. And so given the last couple of fire seasons that we've had in California, there was a lot of remaining work that needed to be done. And that's what the focus of the committee was over the sessions that we had this year. But in terms of having not had hearings or committees, I think what most people don't understand is that this is an oversight and exploratory body, and the actual management of OES happens in Adam Gray's committee, Government Oversight and Government Operations Committee. So, to the extent that I have chaired emergency management for a year, we've really accomplished a lot and have had one of the most robust investments in first response in the state's history. And that goes, to our first responder community, including, our firefighters and paramedics. So, I will hate to see a lot of this be politicized in what could be a really, a hard-fought campaign here heading into the special election. I am very much focused on doing my day job. But as I said, the state legislature took a bipartisan unanimous vote to go into recess last week for public health reasons. And so we will get back to the work of the Emergency Management Committee once we are back in session. But, it's unfortunate. I've heard it said that, never let a crisis go to waste, which I think is unfortunate in terms of those of us who want to do government service well and focus on what it means to actually be serving our constituents. So there are going to be those who try to politicize and make hay where there's nothing there. But
Well,
those are the facts.
Just got to ask. So,
Yeah.
I'm curious, though. One of the things I was watching the news this morning, and they were saying, this is something that a doctor was saying that this is something that's never happened to humanity. I mean, literally putting it on that scale. So on a smaller scale, I guess, I mean, you're having a campaign in a situation that's never happened to a politician before.
Absolutely.
How are you campaigning? I mean, you're doing this little dog and pony show. So, I mean,
right.
But I mean,
well, we have adjusted, the technical aspects of the campaign. So I've got all of my campaign staff, according to health, official guidelines, working from home. It means we are connecting with our voters in very different ways, a lot by phone.
Yeah.
We're going to be sending them mail more. We do want everyone, though, to realize that this will be an all vote by mail election. And in the next 3 to 4 weeks, you should be receiving your ballot by mail. So if you find yourself at home as we're all, sheltering and social distancing, go to the Secretary of State's website or LA County, Ventura County website. Make sure that your registration is up to date with your most recent address so that ballot will come to your house. When it does, there is only one election on there. So you make your choice. You put it back in the envelope, you close it up, and you leave it for your postman in your mailbox. It is postage paid. It won't even cost you a stamp. You won't need to leave the house to vote.
That is the situation frustrating for you because you can't get out there and campaign really and address people the way you would typically do? I mean, do you find it frustrating or?
It is at once frustrating and challenging, but we're doing the best we can. The most important thing, though, that I can do right now is my day job. And as I said, that means showing up to work, making sure that my staff is prepared and ready, and that we're meeting the needs of the local constituencies. The challenging part of that is that I don't right now represent the communities of the Antelope Valley, and they hadn't quite had the chance to get to know me yet. So I'm doing as much outreach there as I can. I did Spanish radio this morning, and we're going to have other efforts like these, like Zoom meetings and, teletown halls, teleconferences with the AV community. So they have that opportunity. But, it's finding that right balance between getting the work done for the job I'm already elected to do and letting the campaign kind of sort itself out. And, I happen to believe that if I'm doing the job I'm supposed to do, voters are going to see that. And that's where I need to be and what I need to be doing.
I'm curious, do you feel that Gavin Newsom's doing a good job under the circumstances of what's happened? I mean, with dealing with the crisis, are you satisfied with it?
I think so. I know that, like governors that we're hearing from, like we're hearing from Andrew Cuomo in New York, that one of the biggest challenges is simply resources, PPE, the protective gear for frontline medical providers, as well as, people power, the human capital to start to deal with treatment in our medical facilities. And so we in California are pulling out all the stops on that. And then as legislators, as we're checking in with each other as a group a couple of times a week, we're elevating some of these other ancillary issues. It just, it's amazing how many things that come to light, across all of our systems that support people and the work that they do. So everything from, childcare to transportation to day-to-day routine things that we are trying to sort out, elevate to the governor's office as necessary for them to be able to make some of these executive decrees, and then also creating a list of legislative action that we know we'll need to take as soon as we're able to get back to session to kind of continue to provide that floor, that infrastructure under folks as they experience either the healthcare fallout or the economic fallout from the crisis.
Yeah. So conversely, what do you think about Trump's response? I mean, what are your thoughts on how he's handling it?
I'm glad he has Dr. Fauci.
Yes.
I'm glad that
I think we all are, by the way.
Some of the mechanisms of the CDC are still in place. But look, this is the institutional consequence of government being incrementally chipped away at from the inside by those who are on a decidedly anti-government platform. And as someone who used to be a little bit more on the conservative side of the spectrum, I've always understood that when we're talking about a limited role of government, it really is about not stopping human capital and individuals initiative and entrepreneurship and empowering states to develop and move themselves in ways that are economically meaningful and to support their populations. But what we see now is when we have failure in the institutions of government that are intended to promote the general welfare, which is really what we're talking about here, promoting the general welfare,
right,
it becomes highly problematic. So there is more in the president's response that I think would be important, particularly deploying the Defense Production Act at this point for PPE and for ventilators specifically. Those two sets of things I think are critical and fundamental. I know California has benefited from some of the executive orders that have come from the White House, and I'm appreciative of that. The fact that we will have a Navy ship docking in the Port of LA to provide additional hospital beds is great. We were granted the federal emergency declaration as we've asked for it, and SBA and other resources will be brought to bear and mobilized. Again, grateful for that, but I think we need to have a reckoning about what it means for a fully functioning federal government, particularly in times like these. And as the world will continue to change and we will see more of these dynamics, what Bill Gates is kind of having an I told you so moment. And those people who follow what's happening just based on climate change, we know that disease patterns globally will change over the next decade and more. And if we don't have an adequate response to that, we put ourselves at great risk. And then, just from my personal perspective, as someone, since I started running for public office, who has campaigned on the idea that we do not have enough access in our healthcare system, I'm not loving being right in this moment. I have always said that part of the problem outside of how people get coverage and what that looks like just for people to have insurance coverage, but points of access, numbers of healthcare providers, numbers of clinics, numbers of states and counties where there are not hospitals, where there are ICU beds.
Right.
That's a system failure that we really need to come to terms with.
You're talking about like more rural areas where hospitals are shutting down and
even urban areas. I mean, we have hospitals in LA and the Bay Area that are being reopened and brought back online to help us defend against this crisis. So we need to think about that. We need to think about where the dollars are going in our healthcare system to put them to the highest and best use and make sure that everybody has access.
I fear that this might be the new normal. You know what I mean? There's an article in the Atlantic Monthly right now that talks like 3 possible scenarios, 2 of which apparently are so horrible I couldn't read them. And the third one was the best case scenario is COVID-19 may be like whack-a-mole with the different countries. Like, you put it down in China and then it'll pop up in France. And then you put it down in France, it's going to pop up someplace else. And this is going to continue until there's a vaccine.
Sure.
I mean, is that what you're hearing from in the government about the dangers of it or anything? Or have you heard anything about?
Yeah, but I'm also hearing really inspiring news out of a number of different, scientific communities. So medical professionals are working on 2 fronts. First of all, on the vaccine development, which we all know is essential and important. And then secondarily on blood tests to test for the antibodies so that we know that if people who have been exposed and many of whom may have been exposed and were somewhat asymptomatic, that they can be identified so that we know which populations of people might still be at risk and how we help best protect them going forward. But it's unclear what the complete disease pattern and trajectory of this will be until we know more about the virus and what that has looked like in some of the countries that face this first and how they responded.
And it does affect younger people. I mean, there was I saw your post about an 18-year-old kid that recently passed up in the Antelope Valley, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the important thing. When we see a lot of young people going to the beach or going for pickup basketball at the park, I understand. I get that. It is hard to be home, trapped in the house, especially home with mom and dad right now. I get that. But it's so critically important that people understand that half of the people in the hospital right now with COVID-19 symptoms in California, half are in that 18 to 45 age bracket.
See, I don't think most people know that. I mean,
No, most people don't know that. And, some people may not know that they've had an underlying condition that makes them more at risk for this. We know that that smoking and vaping certainly make our young people more at risk, young people with asthma. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, it just seems to be getting, kind of outside of who we know the risk populations are. It is impacting young people.
I want to talk specifically about the campaign, and some of your campaign promise, or not campaign issues and things like that. But I got to at least ask you about AB 5. Because I don't think I addressed it the last time we had a podcast together, and I just there's been a lot of negative talk about AB 5 since it's been enacted,
right?
And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on it now. You voted for it, correct? You voted for AB 5?
Well, I did, because at the point that we took the vote in the legislature, again, and people need to be reminded that AB 5 was a response to the Dynamex court decision, which restructured the test for what defines an independent contractor in the state of California. Mm-hmm. And it was not robust enough to protect a number of key industries like our financial services sector, the insurance sector, and a number of other industries that actually received a specific carve-out in AB 5 so that they can continue to function with the models in place that they already had. A lot of them were sales-based, but across a whole lot of industry sectors in this calendar year that we're in right now, we would have seen a significant ramp-up in worker misclassification lawsuits had we not taken some steps. So at the point that we voted on AB 5 in California, the California State Chamber of Commerce, local chambers of commerce had taken a neutral position and had been at the table in helping us define some of those industry sectors that needed to be addressed first and having a carve out to be legally protected. Now, beyond that, it was the legislature's intention, and we had started that work to come back this year to further refine based on industry sectors that we knew would continue to be impacted. For instance, musicians, freelance writers, people in the arts and entertainment space. And all of that work is and remains underway. And then we were met with this crisis. But I think what this crisis points out very, very clearly is that when you have people in these industry sectors where they are operating as independent contractors, and granted, for most folks, that's by their choice. They prefer that independent employment model. But it has significant downsides when it comes to things like this, where you have people who need to go out for medical reasons and don't have access to unemployment insurance and workers' comp. And so there were thousands, hundreds of thousands of workers who are misclassified in California every year who aren't paying into those systems. They're not paying into Social Security. They're not paying into workers' comp. And so when we have a situation like this that tests and challenges the parameters of a lot of those programs, it's important that we have some kind of paradigm that gets as many people into that and having that coverage and protection as employees as we possibly can. So the legislature will continue to work on this. We will continue to address it and try to right size it and have a good fit. But, first and foremost, what we were thinking about was protection of employees under these circumstances and protection of whole industry sectors that had potentially been, impacted by the Dynamex decision.
So to clarify, your feeling is it was the right vote, but it still needs to be tweaked.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I had started on some of that work already with the bill's author. She was restructuring significant parts of the bill to adapt language to make it easier to interpret. We did a couple of budget asks based on trying to cover some industry sectors. But I know, she was already working with Ian Calderon on fixes for the musicians union. Freelancers fixes were already in place in part of the bill. So as the legislature gets back to work, whenever we return, I'm sure you will see that continue. And in the meantime, though, if people find themselves in that space where they've been working as an independent contractor, and because of this economic downturn, they still need help, they will be able to get it. We still want people going to edd.gov, applying for unemployment. If you have challenges, reach out to our office. And again, unfortunately, sometimes legislation isn't perfect, and you do the best that you can. And then if there are unintended consequences, you deal with those. But the
did
legislature
you foresee these
was
consequences?
well underway.
Did you foresee these kind of consequences when you guys were voting for it? I mean, was it the things that have happened? I mean, was it something that you think, well, this is going to trigger this and we're going to have to fix it later? Or did it kind of pop up afterwards as far as like...
Well, I mean, you have to think about it in these terms, Stephen. California is a global size economy.
Sure.
I mean, 40 million people. We are the 5th largest economy in the world. And so to say that we could have foreseen every industry sector that would have been unintentionally impacted, we didn't. But we are really actively listening to and working with those industry sectors to make sure that we get this right as we move forward. And, the kind of folks that I've heard from are interpreters and translators, freelancers, musicians, and people in the arts and entertainment space. And we're working diligently on fixes for all of those.
Okay. I want to ask you just a general question, because your opponent, Mike Garcia, one of the things he seems to has said is he's running for Congress because he doesn't want to see America become like California. Do you think California government's doing a good job right now?
I do. But again, we're running a state that is the size of many countries and and an economy that has a many size. And along with that comes a lot of challenges. But I think we are meeting those challenges head on when it comes to providing people with health care coverage and solving the homeless crisis. And, the current moment notwithstanding, I think we will continue to push forward on those. But we're proud of the work that we've done here in California, and will continue to be. California leads the way on a lot of different things. In terms of, coming back from the recession, California was the first to pull out. We have more entrepreneurial angel investment here than any other state. Half of the country's entrepreneurial investment happens in California. We lead the way on climate action and climate change with great success. So there is a lot to be proud of here that we do well and right in California, and still a lot that we're going to continue to work on. Okay.
Let's actually talk about the campaign. And the first thing I want to ask you about, the last time I had you on the show, you were basically unopposed, and I believe at the time for Assembly. We were talking about you running again for Assembly. I think I addressed the issue of you possibly running for Congress in the future. And I've known you for 6-7 years now. And at one point you were wanting to run for Congress. But then the last time we talked, you had seemed pretty content with being in the Assembly and state government itself. Did you want to run for Congress this time around? I mean, everything kind of was a big snafu as far as what's happened and everything. And what happened?
When Katie stepped down, what I immediately saw based on conversations that I was having and hearing was a lot of the outside interests that you saw come into the race very early on from people with no real connection or vested interest in the communities of the 25th. And as much as I do love my job in the California State Assembly, I love the work and the communities that I serve. Having the opportunity to do that outreach and extend beyond the boundaries of the 38th and into the Antelope Valley in the 25th was important to me. And I know that I was the one best positioned to just transition the campaign that I already had going for State Assembly into this next role. And then from there, once I win, be able to expand on the relationships and the systems that we've already put in place to ensure good governance for our constituents in the 38th. So there was no question for me that I wanted to be in that space to make sure that these communities continue to be represented by someone who has the skill set, has the support of the broader community, and is ready to hit the ground running, getting to work.
Okay. So you weren't drafted. Nobody said, I need you to run or anything like that. This was a choice you made.
Well, I mean, Katie and I had a conversation ahead of time. She strongly urged me to run. In fact, she wanted to make sure that I would. So that conversation, I can confirm, did happen. But No, the decision was mine. But to me, the notion of this seat being in the hands of someone, the likes of George Papadopoulos, or I wasn't having it. On behalf of the people in this community, who I would fight fiercely for day in, day out, and will continue to do so, it was kind of a oh heck no moment for me.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the primary. The campaign's been interesting. Because during the primary, you had some Democratic rivals that emerged. I know you don't want to name them, so we won't. But it seemed that they were arguing that you weren't progressive enough.
Right.
Ironically, your current opponent, Mike, is trying to portray you as too left wing.
Sure.
So, what are your thoughts on that? Do you identify as a progressive? I mean,
I identify as a public servant who cares about the needs of people.
Yeah.
And who cares about, and you've heard me say this a lot of times, public service is about doing the greatest amount of good for the greatest number of people with the resources that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I believe in. And in any given issue, you can take a look at it. And most of the time, just because I am a political scientist and a public policy geek, I can argue for you what's going to be the conservative perspective and what's going to be the more liberal or progressive perspective. But where I always come down is, sorry, I'm going to move my camera. You're getting a weird glare there. What can we afford, and what will actually work, and what will do the greatest good with the least amount of harm? And that's how you have to approach policy in order to do it well, and to really address the needs of people, to address the needs of the economy, the planet, the climate. So I'm just not going to get into this back and forth about where we all are on the policy scale right now, because I think that this hyper-partisanship is what's breaking our government. And we need more people, especially in Washington, who are willing to go and make hard choices based on actual facts and evidence, and then be able to communicate that to their communities effectively while addressing the community's needs. And that's really the other important part of the job that I think people miss out on. It's not so much about going to Washington, D.C. and saying, well, I'm a hardline this or a hardline that. When you come home on that Thursday afternoon and you're here in the district from Thursday to Sunday, or on the weeks that you're off and you're in the community, your role and your job is entirely different. And that's constituent service. And that means also doing the greatest amount of good in the communities you serve, bringing people together in rooms to connect, to talk, to listen, to problem solve, to get people the resources and help and support that they need. And that's a part of the other part of the job that I not only love, but am particularly good at. So I think what I'm hopeful of is that voters in this moment, particularly this May 12th special, understand that the choices are between somebody who is that on the ground, hardworking representative for them, who can also go to DC and do the legislative work effectively based on evidence and things that will matter to them and make the most difference in their lives.
It almost sounds like you just don't like labels in general. I mean, like almost to the point of even labeling yourself as a Democrat seems tough to do in a certain sense, because I am a Democrat because a lot of the principles that I believe in are far more in alignment with the platform of the Democratic Party. But at the same time, I will be the first to say that hyperpartisanship and particularly partisan media are really corrupting our ability to have people engage with their government and believe in their government like they need to in order for us to continue to have success. And in order for DC to move past this kind of loggerhead stalemate that they've had up until literally this moment, where we're actually faced with a national pandemic, a global pandemic, a national healthcare crisis, to bring both sides together to get anything done. It shouldn't take a pandemic to get government to function. Well, it did take a pandemic to get you on my show.
Well, yeah.
Because you had nothing better to do.
Driving my house, trying to get rid of it. Honestly, it took me to get past that primary part of the campaign.
Sure, I understand.
And to have a little bit more time.
I'm going to ask this of you because this is your political science graduate. And I asked Mike this as well, and he's hopefully going to be doing the show again very shortly. But I'm going to ask you to define socialism and then answer the question, are you a socialist in any way?
Oh, gosh. Well, socialism means different things depending on how it is employed. What I will say is that I am a proponent of a social safety net that ensures that in America, where we have the resources to do so, that nobody falls through the cracks. And that means making sure that everyone has access to health care and health coverage, to continue to ensure that we solve our housing crisis, which is a crisis most pronouncedly felt here in California, but throughout the United States. How do we make sure that people have shelter? How do we make sure that they have access to food? And how do we have an economy that thrives and supports people, and with greater access now to life-sustaining employment, not just minimum wage, getting by employment, but how do we continue to grow our economy in a way that creates those opportunities? And, America has always struggled with this. We have struggled with what is the right size of that social safety net, and how much democratic socialism, do we deploy in that effort? And, again, I think this is a moment that points to the fact that it is important to have a robust social safety net in place.
Do you support the $2 trillion bailout that's currently getting ready to get a vote as we speak?
I do. I think there are some details of it that, I think that we might find the need to go a little bit further depending on how prolonged the crisis is, particularly direct cash payments to individuals and families, ensuring that that's sufficient enough. A one-time payout may not be sufficient for many
that was going to be my
families.
next question. Is $1,200 per person enough for this kind of situation, particularly if it looks like we may have to, shelter in place more than one time? Right.
And I think we're going to need to look at that. I think we'll need to look at the stimulus again from that perspective in the coming weeks. And I know that, the House has committed to doing that. I'm hopeful that the Senate will do the same. There will be a lot of work to do, and there will be a lot of work to do in individual states as states' economies vary, in terms of the industries that they support and what that impact has been, regionally in terms of the state. And we are already having those conversations in California.
The Huffington Post ran an article the other day who basically said the $2 trillion payout or bailout was a handing the keys over to Donald Trump, in the sense of like, what is it? $500 billion is going to Mnuchin to kind of dish out how he wants to. That it actually, in a lot of ways, is going to increase economic disparity between the two classes. The really, really mega rich and the really, really poor. Do you think that's the case, or I mean, you say you would vote for it? But...
Well, the adjustments that were made to the package in the last 24 hours spoke to some of that. So there is greater support for small business community in terms of grants and low interest loans. What remained unchanged, though, like I said, was that support to individuals and families, which I think needs to be a little more aggressive and robust in order to meet families' needs going forward. And, we have to remember that what is the economic driver in this country are consumers. And if consumers don't have money in their pocket to go out and support industry getting back on its feet, it becomes kind of this never-ending downward spiral. So a number of supports in place, at the state level as well to help with that. The governor reached a deal with some mortgage lenders to grant forbearance. And so people actually should now call your lender. If you are someone who's been impacted, you'll be asked to provide evidence of that, but you may be able to get some adjustments made to your current mortgage situation. Renters protections that we're doing in the state. So I think it's going to be, a combination of the federal government and then, as I said, regional or state specific backstops that are being provided based on what the needs of state populations are. But we'll continue. Hopefully I'm fortunate enough to win this race in May and be able to get to DC and get to work on what the remaining portions of this support are going to look like. But we will probably need to do more.
Well, I want to break down some of the issues here that some of your more left-leaning opponents brought up. One of your first commercials was about healthcare.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest complaints from the more progressive opponents was that you do not support Medicare for all. Right. Can you tell me what it is you think we need to do with healthcare? What it is you would support as far as moving forward in legislation? Yeah,
well, so one of the things, we addressed early on in this conversation today is that I have consistently said we need to expand access, and that means we need to prioritize getting medical professionals through training programs. That means supporting those programs, allowing them to expand enrollment, and then looking with a statewide and regional approach to where are the points of access to healthcare within states to shore up hospitals and their ability to deliver, as well as clinics, and really expand our notion of telehealth to rural communities where healthcare is very, very challenging to address. And the reason is that we need to make sure that everybody has some kind of coverage. And once we have everybody in the system, they need somewhere to go to be cared for and to be treated. So I do support a public option available on the Affordable Care Act exchanges. And I think we need to do that sooner rather than later. And the challenge is, we have the Trump administration, supported by my opponent, who are still in court suing to take away elements of the ACA and continue to fracture it. And we need to honor and value all the great work that the ACA did in covering millions more Americans and making sure that they had access to coverage. I don't want to see that go away. And the reason I say a public option is because we have a lot of people in this country who like the private health insurance that they have, whether they are union members who have gone without raises over a number of years in order to protect a good health benefits plan, or whether they are people who are independently employed who like the plan they purchase, or people who have an employer-sponsored health plan that they like. They should be able to keep it. And there is a way for us to effectively marry the two. And at the same time, we have to talk about making sure that we protect Medicaid and Medicare, which also this president has talked about making cuts to in his most recent budget. Now is hardly the time to be talking about cutting medical care and medical coverage for anyone. And so it's essential that we be able to marry all of those components together and make sure that we have got a really robust and well-covered infrastructure of healthcare in the United States.
It seems like, though, I mean, I understand, and my personal opinion is the most pragmatic way to work with the healthcare system and the solutions is a public option. I agree with you on that. However, some have said that Medicare for All would actually pay for itself or is actually cheaper than what the current medical system is, and that it would be better. That people are afraid of it, but it actually would be better than what we currently have as a system. And there could be the argument that with what is happening now, Medicare for All would be wonderful. I mean, what is it? Your issue with Medicare for All, is it mostly the fact that some people prefer their private insurance as it is, or what is the issue with Medicare for All that keeps you from?
I'm a pragmatist.
Yeah.
And I want to solve this problem by getting people coverage in the quickest way that we can. Yeah. And right now, that's a public option. And I think if people want to continue the conversation about Medicare for All, particularly in younger generations, because I see this amongst my kids and their peers, that because they've been exposed to a global environment where they see countries who do have, socialized medicine and they are successful with it, that they aspire to that. But I am let's solve it right now. Great to talk about what could happen in a decade or 2 decades in this country. And we do need to start planning for that. If the American population and electorate feels they want to go that way, and that sentiment is growing. But I think right now to try to radically restructure our healthcare system when, as I said, the infrastructure is not in place. We don't have the infrastructure to accommodate Medicare for All at this moment. Do I believe we will get there? Yes, I do. But the way that we help the greatest number of people right now is to add a public option and not take options off the table for people who like what they have.
Okay. Excellent answer. You won the Daily Double. Tell me about your thoughts on the Green New Deal. Katie last time I spoke to her, which was a long time ago, back last March, and things were new for her and everything like that. She would not come out for the Green New Deal. What are your thoughts on the Green New Deal?
Well, I co-authored the California resolution in support of the Green New Deal because I think it is a good starting point for us to have conversations and figure out how we roadmap a more robust climate action plan, which we have to do nationally. We have got to re-engage as part of the global community in our commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to get us on a path to slowing what is happening with climate change. It is essential. It is scientifically based. It's not even up for discussion anymore that this is happening. But at the same time, we also have to recognize, and this is the piece of the work that I want to do, there are a lot of people currently employed in all of the industries that we know we're going to have to make modifications. And we also know we're not going to be able to get ourselves off of fossil fuel overnight. But how do we start to readjust accordingly? How do we make sure that as we do this transition, we are not leaving people behind who are currently employed in industries where that kind of energy is provided, whether it's natural gas or other fossil fuels? And how are we reasonable and responsible about this and growing the national infrastructure when it comes to renewable energy? You know, we are, as a country, woefully behind in infrastructure investment. And in addition to having, you know, roads repaired, bridges repaired, dams shored up, and our water infrastructure upgraded, the next most important phase of infrastructure upgrade that we need is in renewable energy.
Yeah, it certainly would provide a new set of jobs, I would assume. And,
I mean, and look, I think you've got people on the right portraying the Green New Deal as it's like, you know, some sort of radical pathway to, oh gosh, I don't know, clean air and clean water. Yeah, sure it is, but we need to still aspire to that. Yeah, it's not so, right. It's not legislatively, you know, active right now. It is a roadmap for how we start to have this conversation and take the necessary legislative steps and action and invest in the infrastructure that helps us get there. So can we, you know, can someone put on the record that you do support the Green New Deal? Or, I mean, as it is now, would you say, yes, I support it exactly as it is now? I mean, yes, I am very ambitious about where this country needs to be in terms of its climate objectives. And at the same time, I again, as somebody who understands objectively the realities of how we achieve some of these policy changes, that's where I want to be. I want to be in that working spot where we talk about what the real solutions are. I'm never happy in that space of, oh, well, theoretically it sounds great, so let's go forward. No, let's get down to the nuts and bolts of how we do this while keeping our economy functioning in the energy sector that it currently has, while making a reasonable and responsible transition to as much renewable energy as we can get to as quickly as we can.
What are you? Who are you? Actually, I know you were originally for president supporting Kamala, correct? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm assuming Biden is probably your third choice. So what I'm curious is, who was your second choice?
Oh gosh, you know, that was such a tough one for me, and I will say, as a party, you know, it ended up being both, maybe a little bit of a blessing and a curse to have the size of the field that we did. Sure. But I will say that overall, I think it led to some really good conversations and allowed us to highlight some people who are really successful from different, you know, parts of the country that we hadn't thought about before. Particularly loved Amy Klobuchar and her pragmatism. I find myself very much in line with her way of thinking and doing the job. Big Elizabeth Warren fan, because it's, you know, we need those people in our government who dream big, right? That's where the best ideas come from, is that dream big. The heart and the passion of the, you know, Pete Buttigieg and Cory Booker, I think they brought a lot to the table. So I think, you know, we had a good conversation. I think it shook up a lot of parts of our party that felt like they hadn't been spoken to or represented in a while. And so now that we're down to the final two, and it's looking decidedly more like, you know, Vice President Biden might end up being the pick. I think it's important that we all just let's get on the same page and let's dial in to the most fundamental aspect of this, is that we need a government that works again, that bases itself on science and research and evidence again, that is willing to rebuild the executive branch in a way, from the State Department to the CDC to the NIH. It's a tall order, and we need somebody who's ready to hit the ground running and get the job done. But we all need to be on the same page to make sure that happens.
Tell me, I get the impression you're not a fan of Donald Trump. tell me what are your thoughts about him as a president? And you know, I mean, I'm just curious. I mean, you may. And everybody who listens to the show knows I'm not a fan. So I'm going to say it like this: God forbid we have another 4 years of Donald Trump.
Right.
You may have to work with him. So I mean, what are your general thoughts about him as a president?
Look, if I'm elected to Congress, I have a job to do, and that's represent the needs of the constituents of this district. Mm-hmm. And if that means that I go to Washington, D.C., and I have or attempt to have meaningful conversations with somebody who I disagree with on many things, then that's what I do. That is a professional responsibility. That's how our government works. It is set up intentionally to be, bipartisan at a minimum, and then multifactional at other points. And so bringing the perspective of the people that I represent in the 25th District to the table in all the work that I do in Washington, D.C. becomes the first and foremost goal. And I will not set aside an opportunity to work with anybody to forward those interests. The last time we did this, I asked you, even as an assembly person, I kind of put you on the spot about asking about impeachment. And you said, let's wait and let's let the voters play things out. 1 week later, the phone call conversation came out. Things changed drastically. So let's kind of lay this out a little bit. I'm curious, did you support the impeachment? Would you have voted for impeachment based on the evidence that was put forward? Well, I mean, based on the evidence that we were all able to see publicly, I think it warranted the investigation and the process exactly as it unfolded. And, this is why the system is set up the way that it is and the votes were taken. I would have supported to move through the process and have the investigation.
To me, the impeachment itself, the thing that concerns me more than Article 1, as concerning as that is, Article 2 seems even more concerning, in the sense that he refused to respond to subpoenas, said he had total immunity, doesn't have to respond to Congress's oversight. I guess my question is, if you're in Congress, based on what happened with the impeachment trial, how can you be effective? I mean, how can you provide oversight on this president now if it just gets dismissed, if he just says I'm immune to everything? What do you do? Yeah.
Well, I mean, that response was kind of unprecedented in its scope. And I think the American people saw that. And then I think that's where it becomes incumbent on anyone who is elected to serve a constituency that you kind of pivot in your responsibility to ensure that the public is getting all of the information that they need to be making good decisions on matters like these when it is their time to go to the ballot box again. And that's when constituent communication is important, being open, answering people's questions, being available to answer concerns when issues like this arise become critical. And each of us who is elected to a legislative position has that responsibility that we carry with us, whether we agree with the person in executive power or not. I mean, and there have been, some things that, even Governor Newsom has undertaken where I don't entirely, agree. And I'm pretty forthright in coming out and being public with that. But at the same time, also, when it comes to the essential functions of government, you understand that particularly in a time of crisis, it's important to support the institutions while very carefully watching the behavior.
I get very cynical about things now because I feel like Congress can't provide oversight now on the president. There's nobody that he's not accountable to anybody really, except for this reelection.
Well, I mean, look, and here's the thing. The wonderful privilege that we have in this country is that the very last system of checks and balances is the American voter.
Okay.
And so it's incumbent on us in this critical moment to have good information, to think critically about what this president and his administration and how they have governed has meant to us and in our lives. To do a check and balance on whether or not you think that your needs and interests have been well represented and that your family has been taken care of. Have you as a family or as you as an individual, made economic progress? Do you feel in this critical moment right now protected by this administration? Do you feel like your health and your well-being are being valued? And do you think that the country can sustain 4 more years, of that kind of governance in Washington and really show up on election day and be that last piece of the system of checks and balances that relies on all of us? You and I grew up at a time when we had so much of this in school and in government, right?
Right.
You take your role as a citizen and as a voter so very seriously. And it's unfortunate to say that maybe it takes a crisis like this for people to be thinking about it in that way. But this certainly brings to a head a lot of the concerns that people have had about how this administration has functioned.
What do you think about his the way he's handling immigration? The idea of building the wall, the issue of separation of families, which at this point I'm not even sure if it's happening now, or I don't think. What's going on with it?
Yeah, on a legislative briefing that I got this morning, we actually got an update from the Department of Homeland Security that has said that right now in the detention facilities, there will be no active testing or treatment for those with the COVID virus. And I found that really problematic.
No testing at all? Did I hear that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
That was the initial, and that was from one briefing today. So I'll follow up. I'll get back to you. I want to be able to confirm that from official sources.
Wow.
But look, I will tell you as a mother, under no circumstances ever do I support family separation. Yeah. There is nothing more cruel and damaging to a child than separating that child from its caregiving parent or caregiving loved one who they came here seeking asylum with. That it is wrong, it is cruel, it is inhumane, and we are subjecting those children and those families to some psychological recovery that will take them quite some time to recover from. As a country, we are better than this. We have long prided ourselves on being a humanitarian nation, and we need an immigration system that speaks to that. We need to be at once vigilant about criminal activity at our border, no doubt. We absolutely need to prevent things like human trafficking and drug trafficking and all kinds of exploitation and illicit activity that can happen as a result of an inefficient border security. But we also have to recognize and acknowledge that people who are coming here seeking a better way of life or seeking asylum from poverty-stricken, from war-torn communities, that's a humanitarian ask. And we have not developed a system, an immigration intake system that speaks to that. We also don't acknowledge the fact that most of our migrants who come here typically do so by plane and by ship. And they overstay any number of types of visas, whether it's a visitor visa, a student visa, or a work visa. Right. And we don't have a system that easily accommodates that either. People should be able to go to a local immigration service office and either extend those visas easily and with some kind of opportunity to work, to stay as a guest worker, to stay for an elongated circumstance, or they need to be able to apply to be on the path for citizenship. But at this point, to not acknowledge that not only does the state of California very heavily, but the rest of the country relies on immigrant labor and immigrant contributions, not only to our economy, but to the rich diversity of who we are as communities. We have to speak to that, and we have to do better in this moment in governing this challenge. So it means creating a pathway to citizenship for our dreamers, for our Daca recipients, and then making sure that we have a system in place that can accommodate asylum seekers, that can accommodate immigrants coming, even if they wish to be here on a temporary work visa, and pick up some of the slack across industry sectors where they are needed here. But, this pointing of fingers and marginalizing people and communities and scapegoating people doesn't speak to the better nature of who we are as Americans, and it certainly doesn't address the problem. It's
real easy to point the finger at a group of people and say that's our problem, and then suddenly nothing's your fault,
Right.
So let me ask you a question about DACA. And in general, you support DACA, I assume, and but and you talk about being pragmatic. You don't support the wall, a concept of the wall, do you, or yes or no?
I think it has a very limited capacity to serve what is a long-term challenge. I also, at this point, think it is a tremendous waste of money and resources when we need those resources directed at things like building hospitals.
Would you support giving Trump his money for building the wall in exchange for Daca, for example? I mean, would you compromise on that level to allow, give him his money because at least that way Daca gets taken care of? I mean, you know what I mean? Is that something that you compromise on?
I know that was on the table before. Look, I would never say remove anything off a negotiating table if you can make progress on issues that are important to you.
Right.
I don't know if that opportunity will be before me when I go, but I, for one, as a tax-paying American, would like to see us not spend money on building a wall, but I'd rather be building hospitals.
Right. Okay.
And schools.
Would you? How do you feel about Nancy Pelosi? Will you support her if you win? Would you support her to be Speaker again, or do you feel that there might need to be a need for a change in leadership in the Democratic Party? Some have said
no. I support the Speaker currently. I think she has provided tremendous leadership in some very trying times of late, and I think the position is hers. For as long as she'd like to hold it. But I also know that she is an incredible leader and is always doing great work to promote the next generation of leadership behind her so that she leaves the Democratic Party leadership in really good hands. And so I have been privileged to meet a number of people who are kind of rising in leadership ranks in the House. But I think the Speaker is very well positioned to continue to guide us through certainly the rest of this president's administration.
So would you, I know this is kind of like speaking abstractly, but would you say that you would vote mostly with what Pelosi wants to do, or can you see yourself disagreeing with her on, have you disagreed with her on anything?
Oh, look, I'm sure I'll disagree. I have disagreed with the Speaker of the State Assembly. And I think, that's another, I think it's very easy for people to talk about voting in lockstep. But if you look at who is most likely to vote in lockstep, it's those on the other side of the aisle. I have opposed my party and stood down from votes a number of times and plan to continue to do so because, on balance, you have to do the greatest amount of good and the least amount of damage. And sometimes I think that people do put policies forward with too many unintended consequences or with mandates that are unfunded or big programmatic ideas that are unfunded. And that's where my pragmatism comes in. I think we need to just be sensible with the resources of government.
What committees would you like to be on?
I would probably be on armed services, given the amount of defense spending that happens in our district. That is a very, very important part of our regional and of our state's economy. And so essential that I be on that. Labor and education, because as you know, that is my background. I think now more than ever, our public education system, our schools and our institutions that serve young people to older people and provide an opportunity to develop a meaningful and robust, it's so hard right now to say that our public schools shouldn't be a national priority, and unfortunately they haven't been. But when we talk about what kids get from public schools through from kindergarten, from pre-K, all the way through our public college system, schools are the place where people find their best selves and their opportunities for economic growth and to be able to support themselves and to be able to participate in our government in the most meaningful way. And we need to continue to keep a focus on that. Our public schools have been ignored for far too long. And then, education and labor, the other great part of that is labor and talking about protections for working Americans right now, wage protections, work environment protections, significant challenges that we're seeing right now when people don't have a safety net system, when they've been good and diligent and hardworking employees, sometimes with multiple jobs in order to make ends meet now. What are we doing to ensure that they have protection? So that's a committee I'd like to be on. Anything else as assigned, because you know me and I'm kind of a policy nerd, so I'll dig in wherever I'm assigned and I'll learn the work. But those two committees in particular, I think there's a lot more that we can do in both respects, and I'd be happy to be a part of that.
What is your what would you say are your biggest goals for the 25th as representative here? What is it you want to do specifically for the 25th?
Fantastic question. So across a number of sectors, first of all, in that public education space, ensuring that we've got essential supports in place. I'd like to see full funding of IDEA, which is our special education programming that happens from the federal level. Currently, the federal government pays a fraction of what is required to provide services to the special education community. Secondarily, making sure that we shore up other programs that support public schools, like our Title I, Title II programming, allowing more local resources, particularly in the most distressed communities that need that additional financial support. Mm-hmm. I wanted to see infrastructure support across a whole host of sectors. That includes public transportation. Both our Metrolink system and our freeway system need significant overhaul and investment. That's going to lead to greater economic growth here. Mm-hmm. I'd like to see more economic opportunities across the 38th and responses to housing shortages. And I think we can do both things in a meaningful way. Want to continue to provide support, and this would be through my constituent service work for our very robust nonprofit sector, but also understand that when it comes to supports that people need, it might require government programming above and beyond what some of our nonprofit sector allies are able to do. Investment in water infrastructure becomes critically important as, we've been blessed with rain here.
Oh, we lost you, Christy. You there? You there?
Yeah, sorry, I'm there.
Okay.
I had a phone call come in that tried to call my iPad. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Water infrastructure investment and support, critically important in the North Los Angeles County. I think we could become a lot more water self-reliant. I know there's big projects going on in the AV. Our Santa Clarita water agencies continue to try to do more to be self-reliant. And so I want to be supportive of that and get whatever investment we can there. And then working with our business community on economic growth and development. How do we continue to attract the kind of jobs to the region that aren't simply sort of, minimum wage warehouse and logistics jobs, but how do we bring in more tech sector jobs, and then working with our education sector, the community college level, to align, job training programs to be able to meet that local economic need. So it's a tall order of things that we need to continue to address in the 25th, but it's work that I am well positioned and ready to do.
There's when I talked to Katie last time and was looking at some of the votes that she was doing, I was like, there was a part of me that was kind of, again, being cynical, because it's like, well, McConnell's not putting anything on the floor of the Senate to vote for, no matter what the House passes. So they are doing their work, but nothing's going to get done because McConnell won't let anything happen. Let me ask you how you feel about this. I feel this. I want you to call this the Steve bill, but there should be something, some kind of rule that if something passes the House, the Senate has to take a vote for it, or if the Senate passes, the House has to take a vote for it. It can't. I mean, it seems like McConnell has too much power, and conversely, Pelosi has too much power. But by deciding who can't, if what's going to be put to a vote completely, you know what I mean. It's. Would you support an idea like that to get to make it mandatory? I mean, both sides would have to surrender some power as a result. But
No, and I think, this, again, having had the benefit of serving in the California legislature, where we certainly have rules and powers of committee chairs and things that can be used to throttle the legislative process, we also have leadership that is very, very mindful that when you do that, when you don't allow the system to operate and function, you lose the trust of the public.
Yeah.
Government is there to serve the needs of the public, and hearings should happen in a very public and transparent way, as should the process. There should not be so many rules that delay the work of the People's House and of the Senate. That needs to continue, and it needs to go on. And really, when you're talking about that, when you're talking about rules being manipulated and systems being manipulated, when you have the House of Representatives that has passed 400 pieces of legislation in this session that put American families first, and it's sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk, that is nothing more than corruption in power.
He has a really
that
big
is
desk,
somebody
apparently
using their own personal power to upend the system.
Yeah.
And the ones who have suffered have been the American public, and that is wrong, and it needs to change.
But see, we can complain about McConnell as much as we want, but on the other end of it, if the Senate passes something that's very conservative minded, something like that, then Pelosi would have to put it to the House to a vote.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It cuts both ways.
Yeah,
absolutely. Bills should have to go through the committee process in a very public, open, transparent process, and go to the floor under the same circumstances. Absolutely.
All right. So let's
and let the public decide. And one of the things that I really liked that California has done that was promoted from more conservative backers was a 72-hour rule. In California, if a piece of legislation is going to be heard, it has to be in print 72 hours and allow people and citizens to weigh in with their legislators how they feel about that particular piece of legislation. Mm-hmm. We need to see more of those kind of steps that work at state level being deployed at the federal government level at this point, because that's part of the reason that people have lost faith in the system.
I think, actually, I like this, the Talk of Santa Clarita bill. Maybe you can put that out in we'll get Santa Clarita and the Talk of Santa Clarita, some promotion. So tell me the difference between you and, what are the big differences between you and Mike Garcia?
I don't know him well enough to make that assessment. And I think therein lies the challenge, right? You're talking about somebody seeking office and wanting to go into a government position that a lot of people in these communities haven't heard of and haven't heard from before. Mm-hmm. Whereas I am somebody who has been now a 10-year public servant in the community with a decided track record of success. Everything from my days on the Newhall School District and my leadership there to my first year in the California State Legislature, where we have brought back millions of dollars in resources and support to the community, where we have been actively providing constituent services day in, day out through a host of, service venues, everything from, our senior fairs to our public safety workshops to advisory committees that I have. And I am committed to delivering to all of the communities of the 25th the same high level of service and opportunities to be connected and engaged as I have. And that's going to mean, continuing and expanding advisory committees across a whole host of issues where I bring together bipartisan groups of people to discuss the community's most pressing needs and how we might be able to address that legislatively and through finances and resources, as well as, consistent and dedicated outreach to the community with listening tours, opportunities to speak with me, to engage with me. And in this critical moment, I think that matters, right? You want to elect somebody who can do the job, who will be there for you, who is not going to close the door in your face based on partisan differences. This really is about governing for all of us in this moment, and that's important to me. It's the biggest part of the reason why I stepped up. The
situation with I haven't heard any discussion at all about a debate between you and Mike. You say you don't know him that well. Has there been any discussion about doing a debate, or?
No, none that I've heard of. In this current moment, like I said, I'm focused on doing my day job. Yeah. And I know we all want to be very mindful about making sure that we're providing opportunities for the safest practices with public health right now. And that's going to mean, not getting together in any group settings.
Well, let me put you on the spot. If we could do something like this on the Talk of Santa Clarita with Mike, would you be willing to do that? If we can find the time? Yeah,
schedule provided. I'm going to be going back to Sacramento. We're scheduled to go back April 13th. Not sure what, if we're going to end up holding up to that, but schedule permitting, I'd commit to that.
Okay. All right, great. Tell me the differences between you and Katie now. I mean, you're friends with her? I don't know. Are you still friends with her? You talk to her much, or have you?
Yeah. I mean, as a friend of hers that they've had a lot of challenges that have come up after she's left office, and giving her time and space to kind of figure out herself in public life. I know she's doing well. I've checked in with her a couple of times. She's working on a book, but I have never said that I was Katie or am Katie.
Right.
She and I ran a great campaign together in the last cycle, but I'm just someone who is older and more experienced, and I think gladly ready to step into this role. Unfortunate that she couldn't fill out her term, but I'm ready to get to work and step into this role. But as a different kind of leader in some respects.
I guess. I think what I'm going for though is there something that she voted for you wouldn't have, or vice versa? Is there something that she didn't vote for you would have? Can you think of anything?
Wasn't carefully tracking her voting record. I was focused on doing my own job, so I'd have to get back to you on that one.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd have to get back to you.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to ask you again. Do you have a picture of yourself with your mohawk?
I don't. I'm telling you, my mom wouldn't do it. She's like, I am not taking a picture of you when you look like that.
I'm putting out a call for anybody in Santa Clarita that has a cup.
Yeah, it was like eighth grade, late eighth grade. It was a summer thing that happened, and had to grow it out because I was a freshman cheerleader at heart, and so my freshman cheer picture, I do have some pretty short Pat Benatar looking hair, but did not. I had grown it out.
I think I may have to Photoshop one for you, Christy. All right, let's have a little bit of fun here. First question for you. Do you think white men really can't jump?
Oh, I've seen some that are really good at jumping.
What's your favorite all-time band or singer?
Oh, that's so hard because I'm such a fan of music. I mean, I am a Gen Xer, so you put Depeche Mode at the top of that list in a lot of cases.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's see. What is your favorite book? Do you have a favorite book?
Oh gosh, so many. A Tree Grows in Brooklyn is a personal favorite. A pretty avid reader, so there are a number, but that one always comes to mind.
Okay. Can you describe the color yellow to somebody who is blind? Oh, gosh.
Yellow feels like warm.
Okay. I'll buy it. Are manholes sexist?
Are what?
Manholes sexist.
I don't even know what that means.
They're called manholes. They're called manholes. They're called manholes. So I was thinking, should we call them person holes? I don't know. I googled stupid questions to.
Okay, I'm thinking like those big metal things in the street.
That's what I was talking about. Should that
manhole covers?
Yeah, should they be called person holes?
Oh, yeah, we got better things to deal with than renaming that. But yeah, not a priority.
Okay, we finished the interview. You step outside the office and find a lottery ticket that ends up winning $10 million. What would you do?
Pay off my house, help a lot of family members, and then establish a nonprofit foundation to do some of the kind of public service work I want to be able to continue to do.
Okay. And let's see here. The last one, I just think this one's bizarre and I like it. Are you more of a hunter or a gatherer?
Oh, gosh, that's a good question. A little of both, because a little of both.
Okay. And let's get your elevator pitch for why somebody should vote for you.
That's a great question. I am dedicated to serving the best needs and interests of everybody in the 28th. I will address as many concerns and needs as I possibly can. But I will always, always have an open door, and everybody gets a seat at my table. And my highest priority, in addition to being accessible and transparent, is giving people an opportunity to believe in their government again. And that means embracing all points of view and all opportunities to engage in what might be challenging conversations, but doing it together and knowing that us coming together as a community and putting our best foot forward, through my office as I represent you in Washington, D.C., it's going to be my highest priority. So I'm hopeful that people will vote for me.
I do want to you said 28th district, and I think you got your assembly.
25th. Yes, 25th.
25th district. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you going to tell me a joke this time? Do you have a joke?
Can I wrap up with just reminding folks to be good to one another during this time and continue to reach out to people who might be staying at home to stay safe and be healthy. Please continue to follow health protocols. Please reach out to my state office if we can be helpful with literally anything. We're doing all kinds of work right now. We're helping small businesses. We're helping people get their unemployment coverage. We are connecting people to medical information when they need it. So as much as I'd love to tell a joke in this moment, I'm not particularly good at that, but I am good at saying I care about people, and if my office can be helpful, we're here to be supportive.
You asked if you could finish out with that. The answer is no.
All right, fine.
No. How about singing a song?
Oh no!
Not gonna. Not your.
Nobody wants to be subjected to that. I love singing. Can't carry a tune in a bucket. Nope. Mm-mm.
All right. Well, Chrissy, listen. I appreciate you making the time to do this. What the hell else are you going to do right now? Anyway, we're all stuck in our houses.
I'm going to get back to my day job.
I know. I do appreciate you making the time to do this.
Thank you.
And maybe I'll talk to Mike. Supposedly is going to be coming on very soon and talking things, and I'll ask him about the debate to see how he feels about it. He had expressed interest in it in the past. And if you could just stay on for a few seconds here when I wrap things up on this, because I do want to talk about one other thing. And we hope you guys enjoyed the talk.
You've been listening to The Talk of Santa Clarita. Listen to us on iTunes, SoundCloud.com, YouTube, and Stitcher. Barring a life event getting in the way, a new podcast is available every Tuesday. Questions, comments, and show ideas can be sent to thetalkofsantaclarita@gmail.com. You can also call or text us at 661-505-8672. That's 661-505-8672. Follow us on Twitter at The Talk of SC or on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at The Talk of Santa Clarita. You can also visit our website by going to www.thetalkofsantaclarita.com. This has been a production of Radio Free Santa Clarita Incorporated, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. To donate, go to radiofreesantaclarita.org/donate. Radio Free Santa Clarita, on the net and on the air, and we're very much aware.
Any questions?